After letting Damien McCarthy's Hokum swell in my head like I'm aerating some sort of whiskey for a while, I have some notes on the mythology of it, some observations, and a bit of an analysis. Damien McCarthy is from less than an hour away from where I am right now, the house that I grew up in, the area that I grew up in. The legends and folklore that inspired this film echo the panics and anxieties that people grew up with hearing them here. But more than that, they also deal with the inevitability of confrontation, which is the main theme, in my opinion, of this film. But the way that it's delivered is very unusual. And in my own research into the subject matter of this film, I found it difficult to pin down exactly why the story beats of this film felt familiar to the legend it was depicting, when none of the facts about the legend itself were ringing any bells in accordance with what the film does with it. The mystery led me back down research that I had done last year for a previous video, but I didn't speak about this part in that video because it wasn't relevant at the time. The video was on the mythology itself, but this is something a little bit different. You should watch Hokum in cinemas near you, preferably local or independent ones. Nothing excites me more than to see McCarthy succeed in what he's doing. Not only telling the story of this place that is forgotten by most modern media, but doing it with such roaring success as with Hokum, Caveat, and Oddity altogether is a landmark for this part of the world. Not just in cinema, but just in general. Please go watch Hokum before you watch this video. But if you have seen Hokum, here's what I found. One of the oldest legends in this area is the Hag of Beara. Munster has many counties in it, but I am from County Kerry, and 20 minutes away from me, in that direction right there, is County Cork. And a couple more minutes over the road is where Damien McCarthy grew up. So, if I was more coastal, I would be on the Beara Peninsula. I am only barely not on the Beara Peninsula in many ways. To get down to the heart of the Beara Peninsula is less than an hour down the road. Ireland is a small country, and within that, Munster is a small province. Although Cork is the largest county in Ireland, you could still fit a random Texas city into the entire county of Cork. The landmass just does not compare. The story of the Hag of Beara is chronicled strangely. It is ancient and it echoes within the area, and yet it is still so unknown to most people, and I do think it served as an inspiration in this film. I don't know Damien personally, but I know that he puts a lot of research and care into these, and after researching the Hag of Beara for this video, I think I found at the very least a parallel, whether intentional or not, with that story. The first mention of the Hag of Beara comes from an Irish medieval poem written in Middle Irish, which is not something that I speak, so I have relied on translations, called The Lament of the Hag of Beara. The poem was translated twice, once originally by Eleanor Hull and then following by Lady Augusta Gregory, who added 2 extra verses onto the poem from her translation, bringing the total up to 35. Both of these women were members of the Irish literary revival in the late 19th and early 20th century, and while we were battling for the country's soul and won that war, nobody could ever win a war with the Hag of Beara. And if you read a few verses, you will begin to understand why. Ebb tide to me, as of the sea. Old age causes me reproach. Though I make moan thereat, happiness comes out of fat. My right eye has been taken from me, to be sold for a land that will forever be mine. The left has been taken also, to make my claim to that land more secure. There are 3 floods which approach the fort of Ard Rude. A flood of warriors, a flood of steeds, and a flood of greyhounds owned by lugged sons. The flood wave and that of swift ebb. What the flood wave brings you, the ebb wave carries out of your hand. The flood wave and the second wave, which is ebb, all have come to me, so that I know how to recognize them. It is well for an island of the great sea. Flood comes to it after its ebb, as for me I expect no flood after ebb to come to me. There is scarce a little place today that I can recognize. What was on flood is all on ebb. I hope that makes things clear. While the poem is hard to parse, it is generally understood that the poem is about comparing life to the flow of the sea. I have cut out some parts of this poem which specifically involve Christianity, But I want to note that even though I don't think those are important for understanding what this poem is, they will be important in a minute. The narrator describes in other verses drinking with kings in her youth, but now being shriveled and old and in the darkness. What's strangest about this poem, though, is that there was an introductory text written down beside it, which stated that this was a woman named Digdi, and she lived 7 consecutive youths, one after the other, until she was given a veil by someone whose name sounds a lot like a bishop from the 7th century. Now, for a while, scholars looked at this and were baffled. But comparing it to other texts of the time, Eleanor Hull recognized a pattern that had followed with some other texts, which revealed a lot about them. Her theory went that when Irish pagan goddesses were being brought into the fold of Christianity as it came to Ireland, these goddess figures would appear in literature and later reappear as Christian nuns, women of the cloth. In other words, they were Christianized. So this text that was likely meant to cleanse, hide, or obfuscate the pagan origins of this figure has done the inverse, the exact opposite. It's because of this poem that we understand that this was a pagan figure. I mean, there are similar stories that were already documented from the Beara Peninsula around that time of a hag of sorts, but it wasn't really known until now that it was talking about the same person. The mystery of this poem had been cracked. The Hag of Beara, as far as I can tell, is a figure that represents the coming of winter. And to be completely upfront with you, we can stop the mythological analysis of her right there. That does not, at least by my understanding, directly relate to the events of Hokum. Cold isn't a theme in the film. Most of the film, in fact, almost all of the film that's shot at daytime occurs during bright summer days in West Cork. The witch in the basement is not the Hag of Beara. By my understanding, there's nothing in the film that alludes to that other than the fact that the film was shot in West Cork by a director from West Cork. But it is never directly stated that they're in West Cork in the film. And I feel like if the intention of Damien McCarthy was to point at the camera and say, this is the Hag of Beara, everyone look at the Hag of Beara, that he probably would have included the fact that they were in the Beara Peninsula. As far as we know, the Hag of Beara also did not steal children, as we are told in the beginning of the film about the witch in question in the movie, and also did not have a coven of the damned for the judgment of souls locked behind the door in a hotel basement. No, the Hag of Beara was a mythological entity which brought forth the winter. She froze the world in preparation for the coming of the spirits from the other world during Iha Hauna, Halloween, All Spirits Eve. If you want a video about the origins of Halloween, the spirits of the underworld, and the witches of Ireland, then I covered those in 2 videos with the wonderful and illustrious and fellow Kerryman, most importantly of all, Dr. Declan Downey of University College Dublin. He was a pleasure and is one of the most knowledgeable people I have ever had the pleasure to meet, and those videos are well worth watching. But I don't necessarily directly think that they connect with the mythology of Hokum in a way that is important to understanding the greater themes of the narrative at play in this film. If I told you that I thought that it was, I would be lying to you. I do think that the witch stuff is interesting, especially in concert with the events that take place in the film, but I do not believe that it is key to unraveling the story that is Hokum. What I do find interesting is the intention between the version of the lament of the Hag of Beara that we found and the mirror that has to Hokum, to Ohm's journey in the film. The poem is trying to either redeem this figure in the eyes of God or at least ingratiate them to the Hiberno-Christian vocabulary. It is trying to put the Hag of Beara in the dictionary of modern understanding. The times were changing, people were shifting to Christianity, but they weren't letting go of old symbols. And at the time, no one was telling them to. So they did what anyone would do, and they adapted it into a new canon, which was the understanding of the time. But in doing so, and in the way that it does so, it is a smoking gun that this figure is pre-Christian, is pagan. It ends up having the opposite effect later down the road after we had lost the oral history of it. The text pointed us back to the point of origin. It undid any attempt to obfuscate it if there was one. Ohm is a struggling writer with immense guilt over accidentally shooting his mother as a child. His father fell down a dark path of alcoholism and it took his life. Now it is taking Ohm's. He is returned to where they honeymooned in Ireland, to a small hotel in the middle of nowhere. He intends to spread their ashes and die. He will kill himself in this room, in this hotel. He's also writing a book about an American conquistador, one who is based on his father, who is accompanied by a child who is based on Ohm. In the end of this fictional novel, the American conquistador has a bottle with a map in it, and stranded in the desert with no water, the only way he has to crack open this bottle to receive his treasure is to take it like this and break it over the head of the child that he accompanies with. Symbolically for Ohm, his father is killing him with the bottle because he hopes that the secret to dealing with the grief is packed in there. It's tragic, and Ohm even writes at one point in a zoom onto his writing display, "We are doomed." And that is exactly how Ohm feels at this moment. At this point in the story, the audience isn't aware that he killed his mother. He lies about it to a person we will meet soon called Fiona, that it was a robbery gone wrong. It is such a repressed guilt within Ohm that he cannot even tell a fleeting stranger in his life the truth of the matter. He is dealt with it by pushing it down completely and avoiding it. And as a result, it haunts him. During his first night at the hotel, he is drinking at the bar and meets Fiona, who is a staff member there and working the bar that night. She gives him a drink and they strike up a conversation about his book. He tells her how it's going to end and she criticizes that and alludes to the fact that maybe he's drinking a little bit too much. He also manages to piss off a member of the hotel staff. That'll be important later. Put a pin in that. That night, she visits Ohm's room because she feels like something's wrong, and when she's let in, she discovers Ohm having attempted suicide. He's unconscious, hanging from a rope. She manages to save him, but when he wakes up in hospital, he's discovered that Fiona has gone missing. The honeymoon suite is the first thing that we learn about in this film as soon as Ohm reaches this hotel. It is a room in which a witch has been locked in, and it is not free for access. Fiona mentions wanting to go there, and as a result, Ohm believes that's where she is. So he teams up with another person who's not important for the purposes of this video and breaks in. So when Fiona vanishes and he enters the room, he is confronting the skeleton in the closet of this hotel, this witch that may or may not exist. The moment that Ohm enters the honeymoon suite, something happens, something changes within the film, and you can kind of feel it as you're sitting there, but you probably won't put your finger on it. I've seen a lot of criticism online for the idea that because of the hallucinogens that the disgruntled staff member places in Ohm's whiskey, none of the supernatural events in this film are real. And McCarthy also wrote the film, and he is taking some criticism online for it, albeit in a small minority, but it is still worth addressing. Because specifically, I think this is the most important thing that happens in the entire film. And although I didn't know how to react when I learned this fact, it didn't feel like the usual "it was all a dream" trope. It felt like something transformative and different had happened, that this information was recontextualizing something in the back of my brain that I didn't quite understand the moment that I heard it. It was only after I slept on it and woke up the next day that I began to understand exactly how I felt about it. The witch is real, so is the fact that he killed his mother. The hallucinogens are real, and so is the fact that Ohm was tripping balls in a burning hotel and imagined the witch. So is the fact that the minute that he entered the honeymoon suite, he chose to confront his skeleton in the closet, the witch in the basement. It doesn't matter if the witch is real or not. It matters that at the end of the film, Ohm rewrites the story. He has decided to leave the fate of the two characters stranded in the desert ambiguous. That is different than before. They might die. He doesn't know. They might live. He doesn't know. He doesn't answer the question. He doesn't close the book there. He does, however, accept that he is not doomed as he declared at the beginning of the film. He rejects a gift of alcohol that he receives when he's in the hospital recovering from injuries that he sustained in the fire. He chooses life. He puts the drink away. Ohm tried to end his own life, and in doing so, he provoked the exact opposite reaction, just like the lamented Bera. The witch was real, or the witch was just a hallucination. It doesn't matter. What does matter is that Ohm has internally transformed in some way, and the characters in the desert don't consider the map important anymore. They don't consider the bottle important anymore. The witch may not have been there at all, or the witch may have been hunting him the whole time he was in the honeymoon suite. It doesn't matter. It's all Hokum.